Good evening. So I am here, Shweta here, the founder of Hardcore Street Collective, and I'll be taking conversation with Jesse Marlow, and I'm very excited. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Hello. Thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure to be live again. Hello.
Hey, how are
How are
you?
you? Thank you
I'm
for
good,
coming.
thanks. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here after a long wait.
It's been a while, hasn't it? We've been talking about it for how long? Maybe 1 year?
2 years. 2 years.
2 years. 2 years. It's
Two,
gone
two,
fast.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, very well. Just it's quite a warm day here in Melbourne, so I've been working on the computer, playing around with some pictures, and yeah, just taking it pretty easy. Looking forward to this though.
So you're traveling a lot.
Yeah, it's been a busy year this year. I've been overseas a few times to America. I've been to Europe, and recently I was over in Japan for a workshop, as well as a lot of travel around Australia as well earlier in the year, up to the desert, and around to all the states as well. So it's been a very busy year. So it's
What about
starting to kind of,
India?
pardon?
What
Next,
about India?
I want to come. I want to come next year, maybe. Let's do it
Yeah.
next
So
year.
thank you so much, Jesse, for coming here, and really it's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's start.
My pleasure.
So
Um,
tell me about something about your childhood days.
okay.
How were you as a child?
So as a child, I've always lived in Melbourne, grew up in Melbourne, and I was given a camera by my parents, by my mum in particular, in when I was 8 years old in 1986, and I started taking photographs of graffiti around Melbourne, and I did this for probably the first probably about 10 years. I did this. I'd go out on weekends, on school holidays. My mum and my dad would drive me around, and I'd take photographs of all the graffiti that was around Melbourne. And that was, I suppose, my first introduction to photography, but also being out on the street with a camera. And I did that up until I think about 1996. And then I went off and studied for a couple of years and learned about the technical side of photography.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have creative parents that were very supportive and encouraging in what I was sort of getting interested in. And I think that's sometimes a big thing for parents. They always want, they often want their kids to sort of, go and do a safe job that's going to make them money. I was quite lucky that my parents were, they were sort of encouraging me to get out into the arts and the art industry and sort of follow my creative vision. So, yeah, I've got them to thank, I think.
So initially, what you used to shoot? Like, what was your favorite subject?
So when I was doing the graffiti photos, I was basically just documenting the walls of graffiti around Melbourne. And then when I went to photography school, I had a lecturer at photography school who he was really interested in documentary photography, and he was really, I suppose, encouraging of us as photographers getting out and documenting the real world. So I remember sitting in classes, and I remember some of the subject teachers at photography school were trying to teach us about lighting and portraiture and Photoshop, which was just starting to sort of kind of happen. And I had this other teacher who was taking us into the city and teaching us to kind of shoot candidly around the city. So I really gravitated towards what he was offering as a lecturer, and he kind of took me under his wing and became my mentor. And I really idolized him and the work he was doing. And he was a big fan of photographers like Alex Webb and Joseph Kadelka and these sort of photographers. So I think he really inspired me and kind of set me off on that path of, shooting
That
candidly.
is the perfect path. Perfect,
Pardon?
perfect
Yeah, I
path.
think so.
Yeah, you were in the right
Yeah.
company.
Yeah, and I remember at photography school, I actually failed the course because I didn't actually attend enough classes in the first year, and the photography school failed me because of lack of attendance, and because I was off going into the city every day taking street pictures, and yeah, it wasn't until it's probably about a year later when I started to sort of get some work published that the photography school kind of then started using my work on their brochures to advertise the course. So it was quite a funny little period back then.
So you had any photographer friends in college?
Yeah, I was lucky. I had a really good group of peers that I studied with, and when and then I suppose what happened with me was I got my lecturer really encouraged me to get out into the industry, and so I'd go off to things like protests and public events, and I'd meet other photographers, and it was there that I kind of met photographers that worked for the newspapers, shooting documentary stuff or news stuff, and they kind of took me under their wing as well, and I sort of became friends with them, and then that kind of led to me getting out into the industry a bit more. And then, as these things happen, I think photography is one of those, creative fields where a lot of the time it's the people you meet along the way that, A, they inspire you, but B, they also help you, get a leg up into the industry. So I think with the work I was doing and have done and have wanted to do over the years, I think for me, I didn't really need a degree at a photography college, if you know what I mean. It was more about industry experience and meeting other photographers that were going to help me.
So you started earning with that.
Started learning. Yeah,
You
yeah,
started.
yeah. Yeah, I was lucky to have some mentors that really helped me and sort of introduced me to photo editors and people at newspapers and stuff like that, which then got me a foot in the door. And I suppose, I was a very hungry young photographer and ambitious and wanting to make it my career. So I was really kind of determined to sort of make it work. And yeah, that's how I kind of got out into the industry, just by sort of working hard and making contacts. And that's sort
That's
of, I often say to people, it's
very important.
what's that?
That's very important to have contacts.
I think it is, yeah, especially in an industry like this as well. And it's often, people that I've studied with during that year and a half that I was at photography school, some of those peers that I sort of worked with back then have become lifelong friends, or they've gone off and become curators or photo editors themselves. So I think it is one of those industries where a lot of those contacts you make along the way become, lifelong contacts.
So did you do any fashion photography or something like?
No, it's funny. My mum is a clothing designer. My mum's got a small clothing business in Melbourne, but it was something that I never really kind of got into as a younger photographer, and I don't know why. It's just something that I suppose because I kind of grew up around it. I wanted to kind of find my own path and sort of make my own journey. And yeah, fashion photography was probably something I never really kind of looked at, but maybe one day.
So how street photography happened to you?
So back at
How?
photography school, yeah. So back at photography school, when I was talking about this lecturer that I had, he used to start these things on Wednesdays. They were called city walks, and we'd basically catch a train into the city, and we would just walk around the city of Melbourne. And the idea was just to sort of document what we saw and take candid photos of things. And I think that was probably where I sort of first caught the bug of just being out in public with my camera, a bag of film, and just looking for
Camera,
things. Say again?
which camera was you were using that time?
So when I started off, I had a few different cameras when I first started off. The first one I ever bought was a Nikon FM2 film camera when I was a student, and then I ended up getting a Konica Hexa, which was like a point and shoot film camera. And then it was probably about a year and a half into shooting out on the street, I bought my first Leica, which was I think it was the M4P, which was the film camera without a light meter. And I used
Wow.
that for probably maybe 2 or 3 years, shooting a lot of my black and white work. And then I ended up buying an M6. So I've sort of had a like a bit of a journey with different cameras early on, but then I you know, once I got the Leica, I stuck with that, and still obviously working a lot with Leica now as an ambassador, and yeah, that was where it first started.
So was it like you used to print your own picture?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So when I back at photography school, we had a like a policy at the photography school where you could you got unlimited film. So me and a few of the other my few sort of colleagues would go in and sort of bulk roll film and load up lunch boxes and then fill up our fridges. I remember my mum and dad when I was sort of studying, I was still living at home, and mum and dad were like, you know, they didn't have any room in the fridge for the food because I had all my film stacked up in there. But so yeah, I was processing all my own film, and I did that for probably about a 10-year period, and then printing it as well. And then
Wow.
I think it was about 2004 when I switched to color. So I haven't really shot black and white film or black and white work since sort of 2004. So,
You
but
used
up
to
until
shoot
that,
black and white?
no, I haven't shot black and white for a long time. I've sort of,
No,
I
but
see the world in,
initially you used to shoot.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, the first couple of books that I did were all on black and white film.
I would love
So,
to see that.
my,
I have not seen it. Like,
my black and white work. Yeah, it's all online. You can have a look. I'll send you a link later.
okay. So
Yeah.
what you prefer now, color or black and white?
Yeah, I think color is probably where I'm at and have been for maybe the last sort of almost 20 years, and that's kind of where I feel I found my own voice with my own photography. Up until shooting color, so the first 7 or 8 years of shooting for myself, I felt like I was kind of sort of not kind of I was being inspired, I think, by Cartier-Bresson and some of the other Magnum photographers whose work I'd studied closely as a younger photographer. And then I think when I sort of switched to color, that's when I started to sort of find my own voice. And yeah, so I've sort of stuck with color, and that's how I sort of see things.
So you always take minimal shots. Was it always like this, or like it changed later?
Taking many shots, did you say?
Minimal pictures, like
Oh,
very,
minimal. No, I think that's something that's probably kind of happened over time, just sort of naturally. I never I never kind of one day just said I'm going to start shooting sort of minimalist type pictures. I think it's just an evolution as the sort of the as a photographer, and I think these things kind of creep into your work, and you start to see elements that might be working, and then you kind of go down a path with it for a little while, and you kind of continue with it, and then you mix it up a bit. I think it's important to kind of keep evolving as a photographer and not be, sort of on the same path the whole time. I think, especially when you're doing it for a long time, I think it's good to have kind of, deviations that take your work in different directions.
So when did you join Leica?
Well, I got my first Leica in 1999, actually, sorry. Getting all these years mixed up. And then I started working with Leica in 2015 when the Q camera came out. And yeah, I've been an ambassador with Leica Australia for the last 8 years, and now doing a lot of work with the Leica Academy, running workshops and teaching.
So like, what is the difference? Like, you are being a ambassador now, you were not. Like, what is the difference you have made in life?
Yeah, so obviously when I started off working with them, I was working with just being kind of the ambassador for one of the cameras, and now I'm still doing that with the Q3, and I've also running a lot of workshops now as well, and helping with how the Leica Academy in Australia is run, which is, you know, building the workshops and working with other photographers and really getting involved in the education side of it, which is something I'm really enjoying. And yeah, been doing that for probably the last year, and that's starting to sort of ramp up more and more. So that's kind of what's taking up a fair bit of my time at the moment. And workshops, yeah, I've just got back from Japan as well, where I was there with a group of Australians. We were over there doing a 10-day destination workshop, and that was a lot of fun. So got another one next year coming up with them.
You still have any mentor?
Mentors? Not so much. No, I mean, I've still got
Now you are
you know, a lot of. I've got a lot, say again?
now you are a mentor.
Oh, yeah. I don't know about, well, yeah, I'm sort of mentoring obviously some photographers through the Leica Academy, and some students that I've worked with over the years, and that's been a really sort of enjoyable part of the, you know, the journey, is to sort of give back and work with other younger photographers. There's a photographer from Melbourne who I've been working with the last couple of years, who's printing her first book today. So that's a really exciting thing for her. Thought I'd just give her a shout out. Nadia, good luck with your book printing. So hope it's going well if you're watching. So yeah, that's been a really fun part of what I've been sort of up to.
So who is your favorite photographer? Like you get inspired with, you know?
Favorite photographer? Wow, there's lots, but I mean, I love a lot of. I still love looking at a lot of the classical work from, you know, the sort of the, you know, the 70s and the 60s. There's so many to name. I mean, there's an Australian photographer, Rennie Ellis, whose work I really was always a big fan of, and he was actually a friend of my parents. He used to photograph a lot of their clothing. He was back when they had their clothing. Well, they've still got their clothing business, but he was one of their kind of friends and photographers. So I grew up hearing stories about him and seeing his work, and always loved what he kind of did. And but then, you know, I suppose with kind of contemporary photographers, there's lots, but probably the last 15 years, I've also found inspiration from outside of photography. I think it's important to kind of look for inspiration, you know, from outside the industry, so that you're not, I think it's sometimes, you know, not, it can, you know, you can be looking at photographers whose work you admire, and then you go out and shoot like them. And I think it's important to sort of find your own voice. So I think, you know, going back like 15 years ago, when I was getting into color, I saw the work of an Australian painter called Jeffrey Smart, and his paintings really started to kind of inspire me and talk to me, and he's probably been my biggest inspiration. Say again?
Can you type the name?
Can I type his name?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to try, hopefully.
I will check out, because I myself is an artist.
Okay, I've just posted his name. Yeah, if you Google him, he was an Australian painter who used to paint like a street photographer. He'd do these really kind of just amazing kind of realist kind of paintings of suburbia. And
is he still alive?
No, he died. He died probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, he was living over in Italy for the last kind of 50 years. He was Australian, but he went and painted in Italy, and yeah, his work's just been a real inspiration to me. And I was lucky enough to meet him. I went over and photographed him not long before he passed away, which was a really kind of, you know, lucky thing for me to have done, and get to sort of go and sit in his studio and sort of just look at his work and all of that, and just be inspired by him. He had a beautiful studio that had this, you know, it was a Tuscan kind of little Tuscan sort of single-story building with, you know, beautiful northern light that came in. And yeah, he was quite sick when I got there, but had lunch with him and photographed him, and then you know, sat in the studio for an hour and photographed it, and just, it was, you know,
wow.
It was pretty amazing. Yeah, and then he sadly passed away probably about a year later. So I was pretty lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. So paintings and street photography are related.
Well, if you look at his work, I think, yeah, you can definitely see, you know, the eye of someone that, you know, was out there observing things out on the street and out in public places and picking up on, you know, the combination of buildings and color and light and the human form within the frame. And I think, you know, that combination of things is probably something that I've tried to sort of look for in my own work when those things all kind of collide and come together, when you've got, you know, nice light, great color, interesting backdrops, graphic elements. And then when there's someone, you know, with...
You will see a lot in India.
Oh yeah, well that's, I know, but that's why I've got to come and visit.
Yeah. So tell me about your publications. Like, you have published a lot of books.
I published. So yeah, I've published, I think, 5 books. The first one, I've got them all sitting here next to me, so I thought I'd just hold them up. The first one I did was a book called Wounded, which was a book I did back in 2006. And it was a book of photos of injured people. And I hurt my arm and I was unable to take photos for, I think it's about 3 weeks. And I started seeing other people out on the street with, you know, with visible injuries. And I took a couple of photos of it just for a bit of fun. And it was always photos of people doing things, you know, people that had been injured but were getting on with life. And I took these photos and I kind of sat on them and I showed, I was in the group In Public, which was the street photography group. And I remember putting some of the photos up on we had a private discussion board, and I put some of the photos up and showed some of the group. And I remember getting really, you know, nice feedback from some of my friends in the group, like Matt Stewart and a few of the others like Blake Andrews. And they were like, you know, you should, you know, continue this, do it as a series. So I spent the next kind of probably 2 years walking around Melbourne, wherever I was, documenting or looking out for injured people. And you know, a lot of people used to say to me, you know, you could have done this book in, you know, 3 weeks if you just sat out the front of a hospital and just, you know, you would have finished it. But for me, the challenge was to kind of look for people just going about their daily routines, living their life, but still having some kind of injury, but getting on with things. So that was the first street book I did, which is a little... So it came in... Say again?
Can you open the book and show it? Like,
so the book comes in this like pretend plaster slipcase. So it's meant to be, you know, and it's hand signed like a broken arm, you know, when you break your arm. And then the front cover's kind of quite sort of simple and then, yeah, it's just a small book and it's got, I think, 39 photos. This was one of my favorite bits. I don't know if you can read that. Can you read that?
Yeah.
39 people were injured in the making of this book. So that was, so I worked with a graphic designer over in England that Matt Stewart was, you know, very kindly sort of, you know, put me in touch with. And they kind of came up with a concept for the book to sort of have it in the mock plaster slipcase, and they entered it in a lot of awards, and it, you know, it won a few design awards and stuff like that. So yeah, that was the first street book. And then I did a book, the next book I did with sort of my street work was the yellow one, Don't Just Tell Them, Show Them, which
I want to buy this.
You are?
I want to buy this. Like, I still haven't recorded.
Thank you. Yeah. So I printed this in... Say again?
Suresh Naganathan has it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's oh, thank you. I printed this in 2012, and this is the second edition, which I reprinted last year. So I did this at the end of last year, and there's still copies of that one around, which is good. And then I did this book as well, which is called Second City, which is, I sort of did this during lockdown, but this is all older work. So this is all, you know, the work that I kind of did as a much younger photographer.
Amazing.
So this is the black and white work that I did around Melbourne when I was, you know, when I was studying, when I was going off and sort of missing photography classes at college. I was this is that work from that period. So yeah, they're my main books. I did this other book back in 2018, which was just a kind of little artist book, which was a book that accompanied a camera that Leica put out. So this is just a little kind of artist book. It looks good. Yeah, this one. So there's only 30 of these, and this is just a kind of it came with a camera that they brought out. And so I'll do a proper version of this book. That'll be the next one I do. So that'll be maybe next year or the year after.
So tell me something about David Gibson.
David Gibson. Wow, David Gibson. He's a good old friend from London.
He's my favorite photographer. I don't know why, but I really like his work.
Yeah, David's a good old friend. I haven't seen him for a while, so I'm due to catch up with him. We haven't seen each other for a number of years, but David is he was one of the sort of founding members of the In Public group that I was a part of, and for me, David's just been a real gentleman and a great friend over the years. And I remember when I first joined In Public as a very younger photographer. I think I was like 22 at the time, and the group had just sort of started, and it was photographers like David that really kind of inspired me and kind of took me under their wing a bit, and yeah, just really were really pivotal in my development as a photographer. So yeah, David's a great guy.
Yeah, actually I saw your picture in his book only. Then only I got to know.
Oh yeah, David. I mean, he's published a lot of books. So he's done a lot of his manual books, and they've done really well for him. And he's been able to travel and teach and do a lot of that over the last few years. So yeah.
And he's a very kind and humble person also.
Very kind and humble. I think there's definitely I think the main sort of thing I think of with David as well is just he's a very humble, kind, good friend. Yeah,
so I chatted with him, we chatted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's really friendly.
Yeah, he's a real gentleman. Who else do you want to know about?
Sorry?
Oh, I said, who else do you want to know about? Did you want to ask me about anything else?
No, so you have met so many photographers, all the legends.
I met it. Well, over here in Australia, we're pretty isolated over here. It's hard to kind of, get over to Europe and America and sort of meet, a lot of other photographers. But I've been lucky enough to travel a lot over the years, so I have had that opportunity. And then, I met some great Australian photographers. Another one who I'm sure you all know, Trent Park, was a really big help as well when I was starting off. And I remember there was a photography collective here in Australia called Oculi, which when I was much younger, and I was trying to sort of join that group. And I remember meeting up with Trent. He came to a talk in Melbourne, and I think I was probably maybe 22, 21 at the time. So I was pretty young. He'd just published Dream Life and I'd been shooting this black and white work, and I turned up to a talk of his, and kind of the group of people that were doing a talk went off and had a beer, and I kind of, tagged along as the young photographer, and went and had a beer, and then went up and, introduced myself to Trent, and sort of got to know him, and sort of showed him some work, and tried to sort of, pitch the idea of me joining this new photography collective called Oculi, which had just started. And he was pretty upfront. He said, "I don't think you're ready for it," which was probably the right.
How old is he?
Trent was probably 30 at the time. He's about 5 or probably 8 years older than me. So yeah, he said, "Oh, I don't think you're ready for this, but there's this other group I've just joined called In Public, which is a street photographers group, and I think I might sort of put your work forward to that group." And then, he sort of then introduced me to Matt Stewart and David Gibson and Richard Bram and Nick Turpin and these guys that were starting off In Public. And then that's kind of where I suppose I took that next step with my work, was to sort of get out and join that collective. So yeah, so he was a real help early on, and that was, yeah, back in, I think, 2001 from memory, so about 22 years ago.
So if somebody wants to publish their book, what would be your suggestion be? Like, how to go about
I think the advice that I was always given when I was starting off was not to rush publishing books. I think, you know, because once you publish a book, that work is out there forever. It's in that book. It's there. It's finished. You can't kind of go back and then look at it in a year's time and take work out of it. It's not like updating your website and a month later going, I don't like that picture, I'm going to take that one down. Once it's published and printed, it's out there. So I think it's really kind of sitting on a body of work and kind of working on it until you're either sort of you feel it's finished, but also and then the design process takes time. So I think it's just an important thing not to rush the bookmaking process and just let it kind of happen and not be in too much of a rush to do it. So that was what I was always told, and I think the more books you do, I think it's something that I sort of totally agree with.
Okay. So, like, do you prefer self-publishing, or should we go for look for a public?
Yeah, I mean, I've always self-published my books. I suppose with self-publishing your book, you've obviously got the costs involved of printing books and whatnot, and they can be pretty expensive to produce. I've always done hardback books, so I like a book that feels strong and feels like a book. So yeah, they're sort of the benefits I think now of self-publishing, especially with social media, is that you can almost sort of remove that middle person that might take a distribution fee, or the bookseller, which will take part of the profit if you sell a book. So I think self-publishing is something that's something that I've always done and continue to do, and I always encourage people to sort of look at it. And I think if it's a book that's got kind of more kind of mainstream appeal, I think finding a publisher then might be something that's probably worth it. But if it's a kind of a like for instance, my Wounded book, for me, that Wounded book was never going to get a publisher behind it back in 2005 when I did it. Like, there's no publisher that was going to take that. So I self-published it. And then what that book did for my career really kind of helped things along. So, you look at things like that and you go, well, okay, I'm going to have to spend some money to produce it and print it. What can this lead to? So that's kind of how I've done it. I've always kind of believed in kind of, investing in my own work by publishing books and doing exhibitions and trying to get my work out there in different ways.
Right. So what do you like about street photography? What motivates you to shoot on street?
There's a lot of things, but I suppose the main thing is that there's always something different happening. I think I've often thought about it and just said to myself, if I knew what I was going to be photographing every day, I'd get bored with it. I love like the unknown and the uncertainty of, just being out there, walking down the street, taking the dog for a walk and taking my camera, maybe seeing something along the way, going for a drive to a new part of Melbourne, and trying to explore a part of the city that I've lived in forever, and looking for a picture while I'm there, as well as stuff like travel, like having a camera and just going off and traveling and going to different places. I think that's for me the joy of it. I think that element of the unknown and seeing new places and new things, and just having my camera with me, I think that's why I continue to do it.
So you have only one camera, or like?
Yeah, I've got a camera that I use for my commercial work, and I've got a camera that I use for my street stuff, which is the Q3. So yeah, that's all I use. I keep it pretty simple when I'm working on the street.
You don't use analog camera now?
No, I haven't used film for 8 years, since the Q came out in 2015. So I've been digital. I was film up until 2015 for personal work, and then commercial work's been digital since 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is your plan for the future in 2024?
Plan for the future. Wow, that's a big question. So I've got some book projects I'm starting to work on. I've got a lot of workshops coming up and travel and then just yeah, just kind of just doing my thing, kind of continuing on with the workshops and with the Leica Academy Australia and then just working on my sort of my ongoing street project. And Catherine saying Cuba. Yep, Catherine, we're going to go to Cuba. So yeah, there's a few things kind of bubbling away for next year, which is good.
So tell me something about this picture, how it happened.
Okay, so that picture there, so it was taken about probably 400 meters from my house, and it was a construction site, and it was a building that was being ripped down, and I drove past that yellow wall every day for probably 3 months, and every time I drive past it, I'd look at it and I'd always say to myself, there's a picture here, I'm going to take a picture here one day. And I think it was probably, I can't remember, it was probably after about 3 months that I kept driving past it, and one day the guys were pulling the wall down, and I slammed the brakes on in the car. I pulled over, I jumped out, I stood on that corner for probably 10 or 15 minutes, just photographing these guys as they went back and forth, lifting up the hoarding and carrying it to a truck. Some people have asked me over the years, did you sort of pull that stop sign down? No, I didn't. The stop sign had fallen. I think it had fallen. It had been there for maybe a week like that. I think that's just that extra little element that I think helps the picture. The fact that the stop sign has kind of dropped down to the ground, and I think for me it's a picture that I suppose, going back to what I said earlier about when all things kind of come together, when there's nice light, strong color, and someone in the picture doing something and doing something sometimes a bit oddly, I think that's when, for me, pictures kind of come together. So yeah, that's been a picture that's been, I was pretty lucky. It was iconic, and I think it was just timing. Like I could have been running late that day on my way home, and not turned left and not driven down that street, and not seen that and missed that whole thing. But and for me, that's kind of what I enjoy about this style of work, of street photography, is that some days you get the picture, and then other days you're 5 minutes late, or you completely miss it. And that's what continues to kind of drive and excite me about this style of work, is the unknown.
So if you want a shot, how long you wait for that shot? Like, do you keep waiting? Like,
yeah, with that picture, from memory, I stood there for maybe it was like 10 or 15 minutes. I think the construction guys had obviously, they had noticed me by the end, and I think they just lost interest that I was there taking pictures. And often that does happen with some of the pictures that I do take of construction zones and stuff like that, they kind of lose interest after a while, and you just keep shooting. So yeah, it was probably about 15 minutes.
And what is the longest time you have stayed?
Sorry, the longest time. There was a photo I took in Bangkok back in, I think, 2018, and it was a guy sitting on he was sitting out the front of like the MBK shopping center in Bangkok, and I walked past, and there was this sort of white chair, and as I walked past, he sort of scratched his head, and he kind of created this weird shape with his hand, and it was shot from behind, and I just missed it. And I said to myself, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to wait until he scratches his head again. And I stood kind of behind him for probably, it started off with like maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I thought, surely he's going to scratch his head. And then it was like 10 minutes, and then it was 20 minutes. It was about 45 minutes. It was a really hot day. It must have looked very odd to anyone that was walking past, because there was this guy sitting there, and I'm kind of leaning over, just waiting for him to scratch his head. In the end, he did scratch his head, and I got the picture. But
wow.
It was a hot day, and I remember thinking, is this going to be worth it? And often you have that voice in your own head saying to yourself, is this...
Can you see that picture you have?
Yeah, it's on my Instagram, but I don't want to do it while I'm talking to you, because
Tell me about this picture.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that one was so that one is that's right in Melbourne, right at the Flinders Street station. And that guy, I was standing there one day, and I just remember sort of looking across and seeing this giant, painting, maybe 2 or 3 meters away from me. And I then essentially just, walked alongside this guy as he carried the painting back to his studio. And it turned out he was quite a well-known artist who was, being an artist, he didn't want to spend the money to pay for the artwork to be, delivered back to his studio. So he'd jumped on a train, traveled 100 kilometers, picked the painting up from the gallery, jumped back on the train with the painting, and then walked the painting back home. And yeah, I don't think he was anticipating, 100 and 200 meters away from his home that he was going to, thanks, John, looking good too, mate. I don't think he was anticipating that he was going to have a photographer follow him for the last kind of 100 meters of his journey home. And yeah, that was the story. So that was kind of it. That's a photo I nearly didn't take. That was a picture that I took about 5 years ago. And it was, that sort of feeling. I carry my camera with me wherever I go. The time when I got this photo here, I almost missed it because I was going into the service station to get something from, some water or something, I can't remember. And I thought there's not going to be a picture here between here and the car and the service station. So I left the camera on the front seat of the car. And as I walked past this red wall, this guy had broken down, and his car was sort of, there was steam coming out of his car, and the radiator had blown up. It was a hot day. And yeah, I quickly saw it, and I thought, where's my camera? And of course it was in the car. So I had to run back to the car, grab my camera, and then, walk past and try and take that picture as I sort of walked into the service station.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the story behind that one. And then it turned out he, just by chance, he saw that picture. He actually used to work for Leica Australia just by chance. So it was this weird kind of strange chain of events that he'd then seen this photo of himself. And often that's what happens in Melbourne. It's a big city, but wherever you go, you kind of cross paths with people. And he sent me an email saying, great photo, but did you have to take a photo of me when my car had broken down? And it was quite a kind of funny little moment we had, and we've chatted a couple of times since. That one there, so that was a photo I took back in 2011, I think. I went out, so it's a bit hard to see, but I went out to that spot to take a photograph of the shop window, and there was it was like an old fish and chip shop that had this paint job on the window with these lines, and I'd seen the zebra crossing being reflected in the window, and I went back out there one afternoon when I knew the light was going to be good, and essentially just stood there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes and just took photographs of the shop window. And then once again, with this style of work that we all do and love, that extra element happened. That lady walked through. I took 2 shots as she walked that way, right to left, and then another 2 shots as she walked back through. I've been back to this spot, and there's a post box there. So I think what had happened was she had gone and posted a letter, put the letter in the mailbox, and walked back through. And yeah, it's that was the kind of the story of that one. And I think
great story.
Say again. Oh,
great.
Thank you. And then it was just a bit of luck that I got the timing of that one there. That was from the Wounded book, and that was actually the last photo in the series. And the book I'd finished the book, and it was in production. And that one there, I'd actually started shooting color by then, and that's actually a color photo that's been converted to black and white. But that one there was this mannequin that had fallen over. It's a bit of a weird story, this one. This mannequin had fallen over. The restaurant had kind of put the sling on the guy, on the mannequin. And I'd driven past it a few times. I'd seen it, but hadn't really bothered to stop the car and kind of think about it as a picture. And one day I had some time driving past, saw it, jumped out, stood there, and just luck happens that this guy walks past, with a broken arm himself, and then I stood there and I had it all framed up and I was ready to sort of take the picture because I saw him kind of approaching, and
So
he then
did you wait for the shot? Like,
did I what?
How much time you waited?
I think it was about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. That's usually probably about my limit. Then I start to kind of get a bit self-conscious and feel like, maybe it's not worth the wait. But with that one, I waited 10 minutes and he kind of walked through, and I think he stopped at the window and he was reading the menu board for the restaurant. And I remember I sort of made this noise to kind of just, distract him, and because I was worried he was going to go into the restaurant. And he sort of turned around and kind of gave me that look, which he's giving me in the photo. And then he kept walking, and then he was a bit, I think, just a bit confused by the situation, that, why I'd sort of taken the picture. There's actually a second photo in that one because there was two. I took two shots on film, and the second picture he's smiling, and then from memory I sort of stood there and then pretended to be sort of photographing the mannequin again, and he kept walking, and I was a bit worried he was going to say something, but he kept walking, he didn't say anything. And then I remember rushing off to the film lab and getting the film processed and getting the negs and finding that one, and then ringing the designer up in London and saying, stop, there's one more picture that's got to go in the book. And that was kind of, for me, the kind of the closure of that series. I wasn't going to kind of beat that as a picture. So that's when it was all done. That one there. So that was out at a bowling alley that was 10-pin bowling alley that had shut down, and it was being ripped down, and there was a lot of the locals from that suburb in Melbourne were going there every day and pulling kind of stuff out of the skip, the rubbish bin. And that was just that was about probably 8 years ago, and that was in a suburb called Northcote in Melbourne. And so the lady, I think the lady it's a bit hard to see because I'm looking back the front. So the lady with the black tights on that side, I was doing a shoot in that car park earlier that afternoon. Okay. And I'd been shooting someone's portrait, and the lady on the right-hand side is the art director. Oh. And I was packing up I was packing up the car, and I was putting all the lights in the car with my assistant at the time. And as I was sort of, putting all my cameras away from the commercial shoot, I turned around to say bye to the art director, and there she was up on the rubbish bin with the two other people looking into the skip. And I quickly grabbed my M6 and ran over, and then just took maybe 20 or 30 shots as she was up there, and there was another older lady with her dog, and then there was another lady. So it was just one of those kind of random moments that kind of happened. That one there, so that was just that one doesn't have a great story, I'm afraid. It's just a cardboard box I came across one day when I was walking through a market at the end of the day, when all the, when you walk through markets at the end of a day of trading, and there's fruit and vegetables that have been sort of discarded, and boxes that are all being kind of crushed. And I just spotted the face, and that was really it. It was just a kind of just an odd one.
So what do you think about social media?
Social media, for me, I try not to make it, my be all and end all. I think it's important for photographers to have a lot of different things going on in their practice. I think, if you're too dependent on one type of thing with your work, it's gonna, can be problematic. So for me, it's something I use to promote my work and share my work, but it's not the sort of the be all and end all. And I think for photographers, that's an important thing, not to sort of rely too heavily on, social media and Instagram and Facebook and these sort of things. I think use it and just make it part of who you are.
So you prefer website or you prefer social media?
I think it's important to have as many different things. I've got a website, I've got Instagram. I use Facebook a little bit, but you know, I'm also exhibiting, and I'm doing books, and I'm teaching workshops and doing posters and stuff like this. I'm doing, you know, lots of different things rather than just kind of relying on something like Instagram or something to sort of help my work get out there. I think it's a really sort of important thing to do, not be too, you know, one dimensional.
Are you tired?
Say again?
Are you tired now? Like,
Am I
is it okay?
Am I tired? No, I'm just going to have a sip of water though. Just give me 2 seconds. That's better.
So, how was the situation during COVID time in Australia?
COVID, well, yeah, I'm from Melbourne. So Melbourne I think we had the world record for days of lockdown. So it was a tough time, like everywhere. But you know, I think out of that period of time, for me, I was able to luckily, you know, look at work that I'd done previously, and was able to sort of publish the book of older work, which was something I probably wouldn't have had time to do otherwise. And also, what I also was able to do was start doing my posters again, which I'd started doing some years before, but just had not really had time to do. So during the COVID period, you know, I was stuck at home and like everyone, and just looking for things to do around the house. And yeah, at night I was sort of going out and putting posters up and getting my work out there. Say again?
Was it depressing for you?
Oh, I think it was depressing for everyone, wasn't it? It was not a good time. It was not a,
No,
you know, not a
lot of people started so many things like in COVID.
You are?
A lot of people started a lot of new things in COVID.
Yeah. I think, like I just said, there was some really good things that came of it, but overall, I think it was a hard period. But I think, you know, like you make the best of the situation, and like I said, I was able to work on the book and then the posters. So for me, that was the, you know, the good part of it, I suppose. You know, working on different parts of my practice that I hadn't really, you know, worked on for that previous sort of 10 years.
So one last question.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell the upcoming photographers who are just started photography? What is your suggestion?
I think, well, there's a few things, but I think the main one, probably going back to what I said a few minutes ago about social media, I think is something that I always try to tell younger photographers that, you know, use social media and Facebook and Instagram as tools, but don't make them, you know,
right.
Yeah, don't make them your only thing. I think, you know, try to get your work out there in as many different, you know, ways as possible. And like I said, for me, that's exhibitions and posters and books and, you know, teaching and stuff like that. So I think that's an important one to sort of really, you know, to think about, you know, laying a really strong foundation for your practice rather than, you know, just kind of getting lots of followers on Instagram or lots of likes on Instagram. I think it's important to sort of have that foundation, because that sets you up. You know, if you've got a strong foundation of different, you know, creative interests within the photography industry, that's what's going to kind of help you along, get you into groups and collectives and exhibitions and books and these sorts of things. So I think that's a really important one. That's what I always tell people.
So what do you want to tell photographers who can't afford anything? Like they are poor.
They can't afford anything. Did you say?
Yeah.
Sorry.
If they are shooting from mobile, but they want to be joining photography and don't have money to buy a camera.
Yeah. I think, well, obviously, like, it's one of those ones where when you're starting off, it doesn't really matter what camera you're using. You know, I think the camera it's a cliche, but it's that your phone or whatever you've got, you know, at your disposal is the best camera. The camera that I learnt on when I was a student, and the camera that I used as a kid was a pretty basic camera. It's probably, you know, it wasn't anything fancy. So I think you just use what you've got, and you sort of you get out there and do it. And if that's your interest, you don't worry about, what camera it is. I think all that stuff can kind of come down the track, and when you get into it a bit more. But I think it shouldn't be something that kind of limits you and your work when you're starting off. And just to experiment, I think getting out there and doing a variety of work is really important for young photographers. And then after some time, you start to sort of find your own, passion within the sort of the bigger photography picture. And then that's when you then start to find your own voice. So all these things there's little steps along the way that I think are important for photographers getting out there.
So the problem for young people is they want to get famous very quickly. They want to, get there very. They don't have patience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a 10-year-old son that he talks about wanting to be a YouTuber, and I sit there and I shake my head and I laugh, and I think, well, what, when I was probably 10, I probably wanted to be a YouTuber too, but I don't know. I think I keep saying it, but like trying to build that foundation of this sort of wide, diverse kind of practice is for me key. But did that kind of I think it's sometimes hard to kind of tell that and explain that to younger people that see some of these heroes of theirs that have got 5 million followers and millions of followers and all this sort of stuff, and they want to be like that straight away. But I don't know what to say about that. What would you say to them? What would be your advice on that? What would you say to them? What would you say to a 10-year-old boy that's wanting to be a YouTuber?
My niece is 8 years old.
Yeah.
And she's a fan of football. And she
Yeah.
knows at least 17 footballer names. 70.
Yeah, wow. 70.
Yeah. And she read books about famous photographers.
Yeah.
She's YouTube. And she wants to be a YouTuber. Like what? She always in shorts, seeing YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
So they are just with, so many, because they are exposed to this since a young age.
I know. What can we do?
We can't do anything.
Can't do anything. And it's like I said, it's just it's embracing it, but not making it your be all and end all. I think is the way, the best way. Yeah,
we need to have patience with them. And listen to them.
Yeah,
you don't trashing them. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
We can't stop.
No.
How the world is becoming now. Now AI is coming. Now so many things are coming. What do you think about AI?
Yeah. Look, to be totally honest, it's something I'm just not really kind of all that interested in, and it hasn't really affected me and the work I do. So I don't know. There's probably a time where I'll probably have to read up a bit more on it, but at the moment I'm sort of more just kind of focusing on my own work and stuff like that. So not really. I think it's interesting, but I don't know if I wouldn't be calling it photography. It's
what is interesting about it? I don't know. What is it?
What's I think it's just. I suppose it's like. I don't know.
It's taking jobs of so many people.
Say again.
It's taking job of so many people.
Completely. Are you talking? With photography, with some sort of commercial work as well. I think it's gonna, impact kind of commercial advertising photography. But I don't know. I need to give it a bit more thought. I haven't. It's just like I said. It's just not something I'm really thinking too much about at the moment.
So, yeah, it was great talking to you. I could have talked more than it's so interesting. Yeah,
it's been fun. Yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed. I hope everyone enjoyed and got inspired with, and they keep shooting every day. I shoot every day now.
You shoot every day? That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I take a break.
I think it's important to take breaks as well with it. I think I don't shoot every day. I think I have my camera with me every day, but I don't actually get home at the end of every day and look at the photos that I took. Some days I I don't take any pictures. But overall, like if I looked at my week, you know, at the end of every week, there's you know, maybe 3 or 4 days of shooting, you know, some pictures here and there, and then other days where there's, you know, really strong blocks of shooting. But I think it's also important to sort of, you know, not let it, I think the more pressure you put on yourself with this sort of work, you
No
can
pressure.
sometimes, what's that?
I don't feel take pressure.
You don't like pressure?
I don't take pressure. Like
You don't take, yeah,
I enjoy.
I think it's, yeah, try to remove that pressure from,
So I have this
you know,
camera.
oh yeah, what's that? That's a Ricoh, is it Ricoh? I'm reading it back the front, yeah, Ricoh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I don't know how it is working because
That's film,
the
is it?
print will
Film
tell me
camera.
how it is. Like,
Say again?
the print will tell me
The
how it
print will
is.
tell you, exactly. The print will tell you.
And
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, cool.
so I
Very
have
nice.
cameras and I carry them every day.
Yeah.
And I don't see my pictures later. Like I just clicking.
Just click and shoot and have a
I
look at them at the end.
pictures. I take 4 pictures, 5 pictures like that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, Jesse, it was lovely talking to
Great to
you.
see you.
So much.
Thanks for having me.
And please
I
come
really
to
enjoyed
India.
chatting. Say again?
Please come to India and take workshop.
I will come to India, I promise. I'll try and come next year.
I hope for the best.
Thank
And I
you.
hope I see you in person.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Take
All
good
right.
care.
You too.
Bye.
See
Yeah,
you.
bye.
Bye.